Hey guys, it's Jasper. Today I'm going to be reading a fairy tale by an author I love, George MacDonald. The fairy tale I'll be reading today is called Cross Purposes. Because today's story is not just a little bit longer, but quite a bit longer than the fairy tales I've read on here before, I've decided I'm going to separate it into parts. At the end of each reading, I'm going to talk a little bit about it, and then if you're liking what you're hearing, if you want to hear more of the fairy tale, just go ahead and watch the next video. This is just going to be installed in separate parts because otherwise it's going to be really long, and I'm thinking it might be easier to talk about and discuss this way. As our author today, MacDonald, was born in Scotland, up in the Highlands of Aberdeenshire, I thought it'd be fitting to enjoy a lovely Highland Scotch whiskey, Macallan's. So, as always, relax, enjoy, pour yourself something lovely, and cheers. Cross Purposes. Once upon a time, the Queen of Fairyland, finding her own subjects far too well behaved to be amusing, took a sudden longing to have a mortal or two at her court. So after looking about her for some time, she fixed upon two to bring to Fairyland. But how were they to be brought? "Please, your Majesty," said at last the daughter of the Prime Minister, "I will bring the girl." The speaker, whose name was Peas Blossom, after her great-great-grandmother, looked so graceful and hung her head so apologetically that the Queen said at once, "How will you manage it, Peas Blossom?" "I will open the road before her and close it behind her." "I have heard that you have a pretty way of doing things, so you may try." The court happened to be held in an open forest glade of smooth turf upon which there was just one mole heap. As soon as the Queen had given her permission to Peas Blossom, up through the mole heap came the head of a goblin, which cried out, "I will bring the boy!" "You!" exclaimed the Queen. "How will you do it?" The goblin began to wriggle himself out of the earth, as if he had been a snake and the whole world his skin, till the court was convulsed with laughter. As soon as he got free, he began to roll over and over in every possible manner, rotatory and cylindrically, all at once, until he reached the wood. The courtiers followed, holding their sides so that the Queen was left sitting upon her throne in solitary state. When they reached the wood, the goblin, whose name was Toadstool, was nowhere to be seen. While they were looking for him, out popped his head from the mole heap again, with the words, "So, your Majesty?" "You have taken your own time to answer," said the Queen, laughing. "And my own way too, eh, your Majesty?" rejoined Toadstool, grinning. "No doubt. Well, you may try." And the goblin, making as much of a bow as he could, with only half his neck above the ground, disappeared under it. No mortal, or fairy either, can tell where Fairyland begins and where it ends. But somewhere on the borders of the Fairyland there was a nice country village in which lived some nice country people. Alice was the daughter of a squire, a pretty good-natured girl with whom her friends called fairy-like and others called silly. One rosy summer evening, when the walls opposite her window flaked over with rosiness, she threw herself on the bed and lay gazing at the wall. The rose color sank through her eyes and eyed her brain, and she began to feel as if she were reading a storybook. She thought she was looking at a western sea with all the waves of all red and sunset. When the color died out, Alice gave a sigh to see how commonplace the wall grew. "I wish it were always sunset," she said, half aloud. "I don't like gray things." "I will take you where the sun is always setting, if you like, Alice," said a sweet, tiny voice near her. She looked down on the coverlet of the bed, and there, looking up at her, stood a lovely little creature. It seemed quite natural that the little lady should be there. For many things we never could believe have only to happen, and then there is nothing strange about them. She was dressed in white with a cloak of sunset red and colors of the sweetness of peas. On her head was a crown of twisted tendrils with a little gold beetle in front. "Are you a fairy?" asked Alice. "Yes." "Will you go with me to sunset?" "Yes, I will," When Alice proceeded to rise, she found that she was no bigger than the fairy, and when she stood up on the counterpane, the bed looked like a great hall with a painted ceiling. As she walked towards Peas Blossom, she stumbled several times over the tufts that made the pattern, but the fairy took her by the hand and led her toward the foot of the bed. Long before they reached it, however, Alice saw that the fairy was a tall, slender lady, and that she herself was quite her own size. When she had taken for tufts on the counterpane were really bushes of furze and broom and heather on the side of a slope. "Where are we?" asked Alice. "Going on," answered the fairy. Alice, not liking the reply, said, "I want to go home." "Goodbye, then," answered the fairy. Alice looked round. A wide, hilly country lay all about them. She could not even tell from what quarter they had come. "I must go with you, I see," she said. Before they reached the bottom, they were walking over the loveliest meadow grass. A little stream went cantering down beside them without a channel or bank, sometimes running between the blades, sometimes sweeping the grass all one way under it, and it made a great babbling for such a little stream, and such a smooth course. Gradually the slope grew gentler, and the stream flowed more softly and spread out wider. At length they came to a wood of long, straight poplars growing out of the water, for the stream ran into the wood, and there stretched out into the lake. Alice thought they could go no farther, but Peas Blossom led her straight on, and they walked through. It was now dark, but everything under the water gave out a pale, quiet light. There were deep pools here and there, but there were no mud or frogs or water lizards or eels. All the bottom was pure, lovely grass, brilliant green. Down the banks of the pool she saw all under water primroses and violets and pimples. Any flower she wished to see she had only to look for, and she was sure to find it. When a pool came in their way, the fairy swam, and Alice swam by her, and when they got out, they were quite dry, though the water was as delightfully wet as water should be. Besides the trees, tall, splendid lilies grew out of it, and the hollyhocks and the irises and sword plants and many other long stem flowers. From every leaf and petal of these, from every branch tip and tendril, dropped bright water. It gathered slowly at each point, but the points were so many that there was a constant musical plashing of diamond rain upon the still surface of the lake. As they went on, the moon rose and threw a pale mist of light over the whole, and the diamond drops turned to half-liquid pearls, and round every treetop was a halo of moonlight, and the water went to sleep, and the flowers began to dream. "Look," said the fairy, "those lilies are just dreaming themselves into a child's sleep. I can see them smiling. This is the place out of which go the things that appear to children every night." "Is this dreamland, then?" asked Alice. "If you like," answered the fairy. "How far am I from home?" "The farther you go, the nearer home you are." Then the fairy lady gathered a bundle of poppies and gave it to Alice. The next deep pool that they came to, she told her to throw it in. Alice did so, and following it laid her head upon it. That moment she began to sink. Down and down she went, till at last she felt herself lying on the long, thick grass at the bottom of the pool, with the poppies under her head and the clear water high over it. Up through it she saw the moon, whose bright face looked sleepy too. Disturbed only by the little ripples of the rain from the tall flowers on the edge of the pool, she fell fast asleep, and all night dreamed about home. So there's lots of good things to love about the story so far. For me, the whole notion that the Queen of Fairyland is sort of just, hanging out, sitting there, and she's thinking, her people are so boring. Let's steal ourselves some children for entertainment, bring them to the courts and this sort of thing. And this is perhaps, George MacDonald finding a way to say, well, this is why fairies are always stealing children, is that they need some, fresh, lively entertainment in their courts. And so, very casually, the Queen of Fairyland is like, let's bring two kids. I've found some that seem interesting, a boy and a girl, and yeah, we'll bring them. And Peace Blossom, the fairy who says she wants to bring the girl, her way of putting it, that the way she'll bring this girl is that I'll open the road before her and close it behind her. It's so clever. I'd love to find a way to work that into my everyday things that I say. I will open the road before her and close it behind her. It's just really sort of neat and interesting. And then we have Alice, who is, we're introduced to this girl who's going to be stolen for entertainment for the fairies. And we find out about Alice that her friends, it says her friends who called her fairy-like and others called her silly, that it's Alice who's just perfect to be stolen, and she's going to be great entertainment. And it's interesting because you're not really certain if you want to be Alice, although you sort of do, because you want to see, well, what does this look like? What does it mean to be brought to the fairies? What does it mean to go home? Do I want to be stolen? Do I not want to be stolen? Do you want to be different? Because being different means, being taken away. And so I like it because it gets my attention, and it also puts me in a place where I'm not sure. Do I want to be fairy-like? Do I want to be like Alice? And I think the most part of me says, yeah, just for the sake of adventure, yeah? And the last thing that I really like about this is just the narration style of George MacDonald, which pulls you so easily into this world. And as somebody who's reading it out loud, it's a lovely story to read out loud because the words just sort of roll one after the other. And he creates this world that is much softer than certainly the fairy world of mythology, of Scottish mythology, a little softer than that of folklore. These fairies aren't meaning to be, they're not going to be doing anything too harsh, with these children, but nor are the children being punished, by being taken away. But it ties instead into the playful and the mischievous nature of fairies in the folklore, and that's sort of a little bit of fun, and it makes for good bedtime reading. I hope you guys have enjoyed the first part of Cross Purposes. If you'd like to watch the next part for reading and small commentary at the end, check out the next video. Cheers, guys.